Hey friends, it's Just the Gems, and I am in need of a haircut. Hence the hat. Who has time for video games these days? Am I right? I spend so much time thinking about video games and writing about video games and talking about video games that it can be a challenge to actually, play video games. It doesn't help that my game room is down here where it is negative 50 degrees Fahrenheit in the winter. Thank God for Steam Deck and Switch and PlayStation Portal so I can play upstairs and not have to wind up looking like Jack Nicholson at the end of The Shining. Anyway, what was I getting at? Oh right, not enough time. Games these days are so freaking long that wiping games off your backlog is even more challenging than it's ever been. That's why I wanted to talk about a bunch of games that are A, great, and B, short. Yes, it's the classic short JRPG video, but I think I have some on here that you're not already super familiar with, so buckle in. Oh, and my criteria to determine short is 30 hours or less. Most of these are far below that, but there are some good ones that creep up toward 30, and honestly, in this day and age, 30 hours is like nothing. So, here we go. I once described the longest 5 minutes as like the video game equivalent of a poem. And someone complimented that analogy, so now I say it every time I mention the game because I chase validation like the coyote chases the roadrunner. But I stand by the description because there is beauty in the brevity of the longest 5 minutes. This is the story of a party of heroes that has made it all the way to the Demon King's castle, and the game opens on their final battle. However, the Demon King casts a spell on the main character, causing him to lose all his memories. The game itself is framed as a series of flashbacks as the hero tries to remember the journey he's just been on so that he can defeat the Demon King before it's too late. The gameplay itself is very simplistic, and it kind of has to be, since this is more or less an episodic story with time jumping around all willy-nilly. Your stats and equipment don't carry over between chapters. That means the random battles are pretty easy and straightforward. But that's not a detriment in my mind. It's all in service of the greater plot, and that's the main focus here. It's a surprisingly poignant story, and you most likely will feel the feels before it ends. Also, the music is absolutely incredible, and if you're nostalgic for that old school pixel art style, this game has you covered on that front too. It's absolutely worth your time, and it doesn't even ask for very much of it. Castlevania Symphony of the Night opened the door for side-scrolling action games to take up the mantle of JRPG, and Anno Mutationem slots nicely into position as a game in that style. Well, not so much in that Metroidvania side of things, but it is an absolutely gorgeous 2D action RPG that deserves more attention. Immediately you'll notice the aesthetic. It's got that 2D on 3D thing that a lot of games have, but there are so many layers and effects that really make all the environments feel super alive. The combat is extremely fluid and fast and fun, regardless of what weapons you choose to use. And naturally, this game is on my list, so all that stuff is subservient to the story, which is really gripping and cool. It's got that cyberpunk thing going on, neon futuristic cities and crazy tech, and a story that starts out appropriately personal and expands to a much greater scale before all said and done. You play as An, who's basically a mercenary for hire who's suffering from a weird illness that causes you to occasionally hallucinate. An's brother went missing while searching for a cure, so naturally An's on the case. So yeah, missing persons case to world-altering insanity is how it goes. It's extremely cool, extremely fun, and extremely short in the grand scheme of things, so there's no reason not to commit a couple of gaming sessions to seeing this one through. Eternights is a bit of a strange beast. It's an action RPG with some Persona-esque elements developed by essentially one person, with gameplay that starts off punishingly frustrating and becomes, once it clicks with you, addictively entertaining. But that gameplay loop is an immediate hurdle, and I honestly can't blame people who weren't able to or weren't willing to overcome it. Eternights is the story of what is essentially a zombie apocalypse brought about by the proliferation of some new drug. But it's actually the story of ancient gods battling for control of the world. You know, that sort of thing. Your silent protagonist and his buddy manage to survive along with a variety of dateable characters, and you soon find yourself aboard a train bound for the center of the disaster. Along the way, you get your arm cut off and replaced by a glowing magic sword, which is what you use to take down the zombies. Naturally. Your dateable pals fill out the rest of your party and help by giving you access to special moves. I promise you, if you give the combat time to click with you, you'll have a blast with this. It's hard to explain, but Eternights is different than most action RPGs. Something in the rhythm of it. But once I started to feel that rhythm, it became one of my favorite action RPGs in recent years. You absolutely should give this a shot and see if you can find the rhythm too, because if you can, this game is a freaking blast. I had heard a ton of hype around Josh Halloran's 8-Bit Adventures 2 that came out not too long ago, but look, even when you tell me I don't have to play the previous entries to enjoy a new game, I'm still going to play the previous entries. That's something that's just baked into my personality. I want to see where the series has been so I can better appreciate where it ends up going. That is not something that's going to be the case for everyone, so if you look at this and at part 2 and think part 2 is more your speed, then by all means, dive in. But if you're in the market for a short and deceptively interesting JRPG, then the first game is definitely worth a play. You control the captain of a local village guard who finds himself the only person unaffected when suddenly everyone in his village freezes in place. He travels to the nearby castle and finds a blue orb, and by taking it, he's able to restore some of the people in his town. But he finds out he'll need to secure the other 2 orbs, red and green, if he wants to save everyone. We're then introduced to a young thief and an old wizard, each of whom ends up with an orb, and the 3 come together to save the world. It sounds like an incredibly basic premise, but that's sort of a bait and switch. Pretty early on, you learn some shocking facts about the world, and things take a turn for the crazy. Combat is pretty straightforward and uses a sort of rock, paper, scissors thing with its 3 elemental colors. While each of your characters is innately one of those colors, they also have access to attacks of the others, so you're never forced to have one character only attack one type of enemy. There's enough variety in the combat to keep it fresh for the entire runtime. Right away after I finished, I knew I needed to play the sequel. This is definitely an underrated and very short game that more people should give a try. It's also very cheap on Steam, so it's practically a no-brainer. There aren't a whole lot of horror RPGs. Maybe it's something about the methodical gameplay of your typical JRPG that sort of makes it hard to translate into a horror experience. After all, horror is all about the unknown creeping up on you unawares, and JRPGs are all about stats and probabilities and navigating menus. I mean, stats and probabilities are scary to me, but they're not like inherently scary. But that doesn't mean it's impossible to make a good horror JRPG, and Koudelka does an admirable job of bringing those two frankly disparate genres together. In Koudelka, you're Koudelka, believe it or not, and you're exploring a creepy old castle in Wales sometime around the turn of the 20th century. The place is haunted, naturally, and Koudelka and her friends have to fight them off using a turn-based battle system. Battles in Koudelka take place on a big grid, and you're able to move your characters around and launch attacks like you'd expect. The one thing to keep in mind here, though, is that the battles play out super slowly. There's a lot of loading, and the pacing is almost painful at times. But if you have a high tolerance for that sort of thing, there's fun to be had with the battle system. More than anything though, the atmosphere and the story are what carry Koudelka. The story sequences are pretty different from most games of the time. A lot of them are clearly just motion captured performances by the actors themselves. The camera will sit static and watch the scene unfold almost like a stage play. It's very cool, very ahead of its time, and very worth the fairly high sticker price, at least for physical collectors. It's also the prologue to the Shadow Hearts series, so if you're looking to delve into what is the preeminent gothic horror JRPG series, Koudelka is a must-play. Oh hey, real quick, if you're enjoying this so far, would you consider liking the video and subscribing if you're not? Statistically speaking, you're probably not subscribed, so if you wouldn't mind, I would really appreciate it. Okay, thanks. Back to the list. There's something about Quintet's games. They're always interesting from a gameplay perspective, but even more than that, they're so deeply and unsettlingly weird on the story front. And I mean that in the best possible way. Illusion of Gaia was the second Quintet game I played, the first being ActRaiser, and it resonated with me as a kid in a way that few other games have. It's not that it has the best story or gameplay in the world, it's good, but taken in a vacuum, no individual piece of it is going to blow your mind. No, there's something in the recipe that comes out in the finished product and makes this game super sticky in my subconscious. It's hard to get at it, but I'll try. You play as Will, the lone survivor of an expedition to the mythical Tower of Babel. You also have psychic powers for some reason. One day, you get summoned into some parallel dimension where a terrifying face with tentacles tells you she is Gaia, and you are destined to save the world. Maybe I'm letting my anti-cephalopod bias show through, but if I were Will, I'd have noped out of there right away. Tentacles? No thanks. But Will goes along with it, and he and his friends end up traveling all around what is essentially a fantasy recreation of our own Earth. You'll visit a bunch of real-world places too, like the pyramids and the Great Wall of China, and all these landmarks serve as the game's dungeons. The combat is pretty basic, with Will pretty much just running around and smacking enemies with his flute. It's surprisingly powerful for a wind instrument, actually. I'd have chosen a saxophone, personally, but Will makes it work. You also eventually develop the ability to turn into two other characters. Freakin, who looks like a big dorky knight, and Shadow, who looks like a big dorky shadow. Piecing together the weird plot and getting to know all of Will's friends as they go on their journey make the whole experience worthwhile. And like most Quintet games, there's this sort of almost religious undertone to everything that makes it feel creepy at times. Like, you get the sense that nothing is as it appears, and that, at least to me, makes for a really compelling experience with the game. There are at least a handful of the classic Ys games that could probably go on this list, but I wanted to give special attention to what seems like a bit of an underdog. Ys Origin has some of the best action RPG combat of any game like it. It ranks among the top of my favorite Ys titles in large part because it's just so friggin' fun to play. Despite controlling a little sprite running around a 3D environment, your attacks have a lot of weight to them. Everything just feels really solid and good. In Ys Origin, you play as 3 different characters. You'll have to play through the game with each of them in order to get a full understanding of the canon story. There's Unica, the heavy bruiser type. She uses a big old axe, but she winds up with a sword later on too. Then there's Hugo, who uses magic and is basically the ranged character. And finally, there's Toll, who kind of Wolverines it up with claws. Each character plays pretty differently, so it's not at all a burden to play through the game with each of them. The story is surprisingly interesting, given that the entire game takes place in a single tower. The grand overarching story of the Ys universe has never really mattered all that much, outside of a couple of titles like the Ark and the Pishtim, but here we get a story that takes place ages before Adol Christin was even born, and it involves the goddesses from the land of Ys. The overarching story isn't the most interesting thing ever, but the twists and turns that happen along the way are very cool. Even if the combat wasn't as good as it is, I think the plot would provide enough incentive to see it through. Don't overlook Ys Origin just because it's missing Adol. It's a fantastic entry in the series, and it absolutely deserves your attention. If you were a kid in the 90s, you might remember the console wars. Actually, I hear they're still going on in some form to this day, although the reasons for fighting seem far sillier now than they ever did back then. See, back then, console exclusives were much more common. If you were a JRPG player, the Super Nintendo was the place to be. It had all the greats. Final Fantasy, Chrono Trigger, Lufia, Secret of Mana, the list goes on. There's a reason a lot of people consider that the golden age for JRPGs. But if you were a Sega kid, your options were, well, they were fewer and very different. You of course had the Shining Force games, 2 of the greatest early tactical RPGs. And you had Phantasy Star, the best of which is Phantasy Star 4. Phantasy Star made a name for itself by being one of the earliest science fiction JRPGs on home consoles, and it differentiated itself further by having a really cool emphasis both on its story and on the way it tells that story. It uses comic book style panels during cutscenes, which was just hugely innovative for the time. And it really does a lot to flesh out the characters in the world. Getting to see them up close and personal endears you to a character a lot more than just seeing their squishy little sprite cycling through 4 different emotions on screen. Gameplay is your standard turn-based setup, and as an old school JRPG, it's sometimes punishingly difficult. Get ready to grind, is what I'm saying. It's worth taking for a spin, especially if you can get it on modern hardware in the Sega Genesis Classics collection, with some of those nice quality of life features. The World Ends With You is one of the strangest JRPGs to come out of Square Enix, and I mean, these are the guys that invented the Moogle, so they've dabbled in strange. It's set in modern-day Shibuya in Japan, and it involves people playing some sort of death game. They're in Shibuya, among all the people and stores and everything, but no one can see or interact with them. If they don't complete the challenges given to them by the Reapers, who are these very fashion-forward villain dudes, then they're erased, and it's, as they say, game over, man. You play as Neku, a kind of a punk who wears headphones all the time, which the older I get, the more I'm like, that's just rude, you know? Come on. Throughout the game, you get paired up with different characters and have to battle the Noise, which are just pretty much monsters. The way you fight them, though, is pretty nuts. You control both Neku and his partner at the same time. On the Nintendo DS, where this game first came out, you control Neku on the bottom screen with the stylus by using different motions to make him use his various attacks. Your partner is on the top screen, and you fight there by inputting directional button combinations. There's synergy that builds up between Neku and his friends as they fight, which makes your attacks stronger. But if the idea of controlling two characters at once sounds daunting, well, I don't blame you. Fortunately, in practice, it's much easier than it sounds. For the remake on the Switch, the system had to be changed significantly, so unfortunately, it's not as fun. I'll recommend the OG DS cart for this one, but if you haven't given this one a shot, I recommend you do so in any way you can. Not many JRPGs can claim to be based on a true story, and I mean, I guess honestly this one can't really either, but it comes closer than most. Eternal Sonata stars Polish composer Frédéric Chopin as he lies on his deathbed and dreams up a fantasy world, as one does. Originally, this game was an Xbox 360 exclusive, but we eventually also received a PS3 version, which is what I played. Battles play out on a big field where you can move your character into position and essentially wail on the enemies until your timer runs out. Enemies, naturally, will do the same. This is a very pretty game, nice cel-shaded graphics and music from both Chopin and Motoi Sakuraba, and it just has a level of charm to it that was lacking in a lot of the PlayStation 3, Xbox 360 generation. It dared to be colorful and whimsical when everyone else was going dark and brown and gray. This is the longest game on the list, with a main story playthrough coming in at around 30 hours, but like I said at the beginning, nowadays, 30 hours is nothing. It has a fun story, a good combat system, great music. It's just a shame that it's still locked on that old generation of hardware. Hopefully we'll get a remaster or something soon. Anyway, that's it. Played any of these? Any other shouties I think I should look at? Let me know down in the comments, and maybe I'll include them the next time I do a list like this. Once again, if you consider liking the video if you liked it, and subscribing too, I'd really appreciate it. Thank you so much, and until next time, bye. Eternights is the story of what is essentially a zombie apocalypse brought about by the